The silence in this room is different. It's not the comfortable, lived-in quiet of my own home, where the walls held echoes of laughter and arguments and the gentle hum of a life fully lived. This silence is sterile, imposed, thick with the absence of everything that was mine. The beige walls press in. The standard issue furniture sits stiffly, and the air smells faintly of disinfectant and regret. It's been 3 days, though it feels both like an eternity and a moment I can't quite grasp. 3 days since Sophie, with her bright, forced smile and her carefully rehearsed explanations, deposited me here. "For your own good, Mom," she'd said, her voice a little too loud, avoiding my eyes. "It's time you were somewhere safe, somewhere you wouldn't be alone." Alone? I was never alone in my home. My home was full of ghosts I welcomed, memories I cherished, a garden that whispered secrets only I understood. Here I am utterly, irrevocably alone. How does a life shrink down to this? A single room, a few boxes of carefully curated belongings, the things Sophie deemed essential, the things that fit. My favorite armchair, the one I inherited from my own mother, didn't fit. The antique writing desk where I paid bills and wrote letters that were never sent, too large. The photographs on the small bedside table are a mockery, grinning faces from a life I no longer inhabit, staring out at the blank walls of my new reality. That picture of Sophie, on her graduation day, beaming, her arms around me. She looked so happy, so full of promise. I remember that day, the pride swelling in my chest, the quiet determination I felt to give her everything she needed. I worked extra hours. I went without, all so she could have those opportunities. Was that a mistake? Was I just cultivating the ground for this particular harvest? My mind keeps circling back to the house. My house. The house I lived in for 40 years. The house where I brought Sophie home from the hospital. Where she took her first steps, where we decorated the Christmas tree every year, where her father and I built a life brick by brick. It was more than just a building. It was the container of my existence, the physical manifestation of my independence. And now it's empty. Or rather, it's waiting. Waiting for what? Sophie was vague. "We'll figure things out, Mom. Don't you worry your head about it. Don't worry," as if worry isn't the only thing left to do. She said it was getting too much for me. The stairs, the garden, the general upkeep. And yes, perhaps there were days when my knees ached, or the weeds seemed to multiply overnight. But I managed. I wanted to manage. It was my choice to make, wasn't it? And my life to live? She presented it as a gentle necessity, a logical next step. She brought brochures, glossy pictures of smiling residents engaged in activities, promises of care and community. It all seemed so reasonable, so well-intentioned on the surface. And I, like a fool, let myself be swayed by the superficial charm, the veneer of filial concern, because the alternative, questioning her motives, acknowledging the coldness beneath the surface, was too painful to contemplate. It's amazing how much you can convince yourself of something, how you can twist reality, just to avoid looking directly at a truth that would shatter your world. And my world has shattered. It lies in pieces around me, and I don't know how to put it back together from this beige room with the smell of disinfectant. The betrayal is a dull ache in my chest, a constant pressure that makes it hard to breathe. It's not just the loss of the house, it's the loss of trust, the crushing realization that the person I raised, the person I loved unconditionally, could do this to me, could see me not as her mother, but as a problem to be solved, a burden to be offloaded. How did I not see it coming? Were there signs I ignored? Were her smiles always a little too wide? Her assurances a little too insistent? Or was I simply too blinded by love to see the truth? It's a question that echoes in the silence, finding no answer but the thumping of my own bruised heart. The first few days were a blur of polite strangers and forced activities. "Welcome, Eleanor," a cheerful woman with a name tag said, her smile painted on. "We're so happy to have you join our family." Family. The word felt like a slap. My family put me here. They showed me the activity schedule, the dining hall menu. They explained the rules. Lights out at 10. Visits need to be scheduled. Don't wander outside the designated areas. My world, which once spanned a neighborhood, a town, even occasional trips to the coast, had shrunk to the confines of this building and its small, manicured courtyard. I tried to participate, to be the good resident they expected. I sat through a lukewarm bingo game, nodding and smiling emptily. I joined a small group watching a nature documentary, the vibrant images on the screen, a cruel contrast to the muted reality of my surroundings. Every interaction felt shallow, every forced conversation a reminder of the rich, messy, authentic connections I had lost. My thoughts kept returning to the house. I'd picture it in my mind. The worn patch on the living room rug where the dog used to sleep, the way the afternoon sun hit the kitchen counter, the creak of the top stair. These weren't just details. They were anchors to my past, to who I was. And Sophie had cut those anchors. She'd talked about it so calmly, so logically. It's too big for you now, Mom. It's a lot of upkeep. And property taxes are just going up and up. Money. Was it always about money? She'd never been one for extravagance when she was younger, but ever since she started dating Liam, things seemed to change. Liam, her fiancé, charming, successful, with a handshake that felt a little too firm and eyes that seemed to always be calculating. He was often there when Sophie came over in the months before, standing slightly behind her, nodding in agreement with everything she said, his silence more menacing than any words could have been. Did he put her up to this? Was this his idea? The thought sent a fresh wave of nausea through me. That the man my daughter was planning to spend her life with could see me as an obstacle, something to be moved out of the way. I remember the conversation about the engagement ring. It happened last Christmas, when they announced their engagement. Sophie's hand outstretched, a massive diamond glittering under the tree lights. "It's a family heirloom, Mom," she'd said, beaming. "Liam's great-grandmother's. Isn't it stunning?" It was, undeniably, a magnificent ring, elegant, substantial, clearly worth a fortune. I'd oohed and ahed appropriately, congratulating them both, feeling a genuine warmth for my daughter's happiness. But even then, something felt slightly off. Liam's family was old money, very traditional. Giving such a significant heirloom felt heavy, like a statement, or perhaps like an investment. I shook the thought away at the time. Why would I look for darkness in my daughter's joy? But now, everything feels tinged with that same suspicion. Every past interaction is viewed through the lens of this present betrayal. Was the ring a symbol of love, or a symbol of future wealth and status that needed securing? The days here blended into a monotonous routine. Wake up, eat breakfast in the dining hall, a few scheduled activities, lunch, a quiet afternoon, dinner, lights out. The staff were polite, efficient, but distant. They saw me as one of many residents, a name on a list, another set of needs to be managed. There was no recognition of the vibrant, independent woman I had been just days before. I tried to talk to one of the younger aides, a girl named Clara with kind eyes. I started to tell her about my garden, about the roses I had been tending for 20 years. Her eyes glazed over. "That's nice, dear," she said, patting my hand absently before moving on to the next task. I stopped trying after that. It was easier to retreat into myself, to live inside my own head where the memories of my life were still sharp and clear, untainted by the sterile reality of this place. Sophie called occasionally. Her calls were brief, cheerful, full of generic questions. "How are you settling in, Mom? Is the food okay? Are you making friends?" It felt like she was ticking boxes. I kept my answers short. "Fine, Sophie. Yes, it's early days. I didn't ask about the house. I couldn't bring myself to." The thought of her selling it, of strangers walking through my rooms, of my life being dismantled and dispersed, was unbearable. I clung to the hope, however faint, that maybe she just needed me out for a little while, that maybe she had some other plan. But deep down, I knew the finality of being brought here, of my belongings being limited to a few boxes, screamed the truth. This was permanent. This was the end of the life I knew. And the silence that followed her brief calls was the loudest sound of all. It was the sound of a door slamming shut, a connection severed, a love that had turned cold and calculating. The betrayal felt heavier after those calls, the feigned concern a crueler weapon than outright honesty would have been. It left me feeling not just abandoned, but gaslit, made to feel like my pain was unwarranted, that this was somehow good for me. How could she do this? How could the little girl who used to crawl into my lap after a bad dream grow into this person? The question gnawed at me, a relentless, dull ache that mirrored the emptiness in my stomach. I started to observe things more closely. The other residents. Some seemed genuinely content, having chosen this life, finding companionship and care they needed. Others, like me, seemed adrift, their eyes holding a similar distant sadness. I saw families visit, some warm and engaged, others stiff and awkward, their conversations polite and superficial. It was a microcosm of life, but filtered through a lens of institutional routine and unspoken histories. I watched the staff, learning their routines, their shift changes. I noted the times when the main doors were less busy, when certain areas were unsupervised. My mind, which had felt sluggish and numb with shock, began to stir, a flicker of something other than despair. Not hope. Not yet. Something harder. I overheard a conversation between two aides about Mrs. Gable down the hall. Her daughter visits every day, one said, sighing. Brings her homemade cookies, reads to her. Some people are lucky. The other scoffed quietly. Yeah, lucky. My sister just dumped mom here and barely calls. Says she's too busy. It was a small exchange, quickly forgotten by them, but it landed on me like a stone. Too busy. Was that it? Was my life, my existence, simply an inconvenience to Sophie? Did her busy, important life with Liam not have room for an aging mother? The thought was more a condemnation than a question. I remembered the last time I saw Sophie in my house. She'd come over with Liam. They were talking about wedding plans, about the flat they were looking at in the city. Everything sounded expensive, luxurious. Sophie complained about the cost of venues, the price of caterers. Liam talked about needing to invest wisely, about setting themselves up for the future. I offered them tea, biscuits. I tried to contribute to the conversation, asking about her dress, his suit. They answered politely, but their eyes kept darting around the room, lingering on the furniture, the paintings on the wall. At the time, I thought they were just appreciating the comfortable atmosphere. Now, I saw it differently. They were appraising, valuing, calculating. They weren't looking at a home filled with memories. They were looking at an asset, a potential source of funds for their lavish future. The memory was sharp, stinging. It was the moment the abstract idea of betrayal became concrete, rooted in something as cold and hard as money, and in that moment, sitting in this sterile room, the soft flicker of something harder ignited into a small, steady flame. I started to notice things. The way the courier van arrived every morning. The small, independent coffee shop, just a block away, visible from the street corner near the facility entrance. The schedule of the local bus that stopped outside. My mind, once a prisoner of despair, began to work. Not on how to escape, not on how to get back to the past, but on how to reclaim something in the present, how to assert my existence, how to show Sophie and myself that I wasn't just a problem to be solved, a possession to be discarded. The engagement ring. It came back to me, unbidden, a sudden, sharp image in my mind. That enormous diamond sparkling under the Christmas tree, a symbol of their future, built, I now suspected, on the foundation of my past, on the value of the house, on the inconvenience of my continued independence. It was a symbol of their power, their entitlement, their casual cruelty. And then, another thought, quiet but firm, bloomed in the sterile air of my room. What if that symbol of their power could become the instrument of mine? The idea felt audacious, dangerous, thrilling. It was a spark of rebellion in the suffocating conformity of my new life. It was taking the most potent symbol of their betrayal and twisting it, turning it against them. The internal conflict began. Was this petty? Was it spiteful? Was I sinking to their level? My conscience, a voice trained over 70 years of respectable living, recoiled. But then another voice, raw and bruised and angry, spoke louder. They took my home. They stripped me of my independence. They treated me like a thing. They built their future on my ruins. What do I owe them? Nothing. I owe them nothing. And the ring? It wasn't Sophie's heritage from a place of love and family history. Not really. It was Liam's family's. It was a transaction, a statement of wealth and status that Sophie was buying into. It represented the life she chose, the life that had no room for me. The decision solidified slowly, not in a rush of anger, but with a cold, clear certainty. The ring was hers. Yes, but it was also a piece of this whole rotten structure they had built. And maybe, just maybe, I could pull one brick out. A very expensive brick. The plan was simple, born of necessity and a quiet desperation. I needed to get out, just for a little while, and I needed the ring. The ring wasn't here with me. Of course, Sophie would have kept it somewhere safe, in her flat, probably in a jewelry box. Getting to it would be the hardest part. I couldn't just walk out and go to her flat. I was being monitored, subtly but surely. Any unauthorized absence would raise alarms, bring Sophie rushing here, likely ending with more restrictions. No, it had to be done carefully, planned down to the smallest detail. I spent days watching, waiting, thinking. I timed the staff breaks. I learned which doors had alarms and which didn't. I studied the visitor's log, noting the times when the lobby was empty. I needed an excuse to leave. Something legitimate enough that it wouldn't be questioned, but private enough that I wouldn't be accompanied. A doctor's appointment? No, they usually arrange transportation and accompaniment for those. A visit to the dentist? Maybe. I remembered I was due for a checkup. I could call my old dentist. The one near my house. Not the one recommended by the facility. That would give me a reason to go back to my old neighborhood, to be close to Sophie's flat. I made the call from the public phone down the hall, whispering so no one would overhear. My old dentist, Dr. Adams, sounded surprised to hear from me. I explained, vaguely, that I was staying somewhere temporary, but needed my regular checkup. He squeezed me in for an appointment the following week. Success. One hurdle cleared. Now, how to get from the facility to his office, and crucially to Sophie's flat and back, all within the time frame of a standard appointment. It required precise timing, a little bit of luck, and a whole lot of quiet determination. The day of the appointment arrived. I dressed carefully, choosing an outfit that looked normal, unremarkable. I felt a strange mix of nerves and exhilaration, a feeling I hadn't experienced in years. It was like being young again, planning some clandestine adventure. The facility arranged a taxi. The driver was a pleasant young man, making small talk that I barely heard, my mind racing with the steps of my plan. The taxi dropped me off at the dentist office. I went inside, confirmed my appointment, and sat in the waiting room for a few minutes, pretending to fill out forms. Then I stood up, feigned a sudden wave of dizziness, and told the receptionist I needed some air. I'd just step outside for a moment. Stepping outside was like stepping into a different world. The air felt fresher, the sounds of the city vibrant and alive compared to the muffled quiet of the facility. I didn't waste a second. I walked quickly, not running, not looking back. I knew the bus route from memory. The stop was just around the corner. I had enough cash for the fare, squirreled away from my small allowance. The bus arrived within minutes. I boarded, found a seat near the back, and watched the familiar streets go by. Every corner, every shop front was a pang of nostalgia, a reminder of the life that had been taken from me. But I couldn't dwell on that now. I had a mission. The bus stop nearest Sophie's flat was 3 stops before the dentist office. I got off, my heart pounding. Her building was a modern, secure high-rise. I knew the entry code. Sophie had given it to me months ago, for emergencies, something I now found bitterly ironic. My hand trembled slightly as I punched in the numbers. The door buzzed, and I slipped inside. The lobby was deserted. I walked to the lift, pressed the button for her floor. The ride up felt impossibly long. What if she was home? What if Liam was there? The chances were slim. It was a weekday morning, they would both be at work. But the fear was real. Her flat was immaculate, minimalist, starkly different from the comfortable clutter of my old home. It felt less like a place to live, and more like a showroom. Where would she keep the ring? I thought back to our conversations, to her habits. She was tidy, organized. Her bedroom. I went straight there. Her dressing table was clear except for a few perfume bottles. I opened the drawers, clothes, makeup, notepads. Then I saw it, a small, antique wooden jewelry box sitting on a shelf in her walk-in wardrobe. It looked out of place amidst the modern design of the room, likely another heirloom, perhaps from Liam's family. My hands shook as I reached for it. It wasn't locked. I lifted the lid, and there it was, lying on a velvet cushion, glittering. Vigor? Even then I remembered. It seemed to pulse with a cold, hard light. I picked it up. The weight of it was surprising. Not just the physical weight, but the weight of everything it represented. Their future, my past. The betrayal, the anger surged hot and sharp. This single object, this symbol of their aspiration, was worth more than my entire life's comfort and security apparently. This was what she valued. This was what she built her life upon. My resolve hardened, crystallizing in that moment. There was no turning back. I took the ring, placing it carefully in the small coin purse I carried. I closed the jewelry box, put it back exactly where I found it. I did a quick scan of the room, ensuring I hadn't disturbed anything. Then I left the bedroom, walked quickly through the silent flat, and let myself out. Down the lift, through the lobby, and back onto the street. The relief was immense, a shaky wave washing over me. But it was quickly replaced by the urgency of the next step. I needed to get back on the bus, get to the dentist office, spend a reasonable amount of time there, and get back to the facility, all before anyone noticed I had been gone longer than expected. I made it to the dentist office just in time. I apologized profusely for my sudden dizziness, explained I just needed a breath of air, and they ushered me in. The checkup was routine, painless. Dr. Adams commented on my slightly elevated blood pressure, suggesting I try to relax more. Relax? I almost laughed. I had just pulled off a heist and was carrying a small fortune in my purse. Relaxation was a distant concept. When the appointment was over, I thanked them, paid, and stepped back out onto the street. The facility had arranged a taxi to pick me up at a specific time. I had maybe 40 minutes. Enough time to find a jeweler or a reputable pawn shop. There was a row of shops visible down the street. I walked towards them, my eyes scanning. A sign, gold and silver buyer. It looked small, discreet. I walked inside. The man behind the counter was older, with a weary look in his eyes. He regarded me with polite indifference. "Can I help you, ma'am?" My voice was steady as I spoke. "I have something I'd like to sell." I took the ring out of my purse and placed it on the counter between us. Under the fluorescent lights, the diamond seemed to shrink slightly, losing some of its aggressive sparkle, becoming just a stone. The man picked it up, his eyes changing from indifferent to sharp with professional interest. He examined it closely under a loupe, tested the metal, weighed it. The silence in the shop was heavy, broken only by the ticking of a clock on the wall, and the sounds of traffic outside. He looked up at me, his expression unreadable. "It's a significant stone," he said, his voice quiet. "Very high quality. The setting is platinum, antique, well made." He named a figure. My breath caught in my throat. It was more than I had dared to hope. More than enough to change things. I didn't hesitate. "I'll sell it," I said, my voice firm. He nodded. No questions asked. He drew up the paperwork, asked for my identification. I provided it, feeling a strange sense of detachment, as if this were happening to someone else. He counted out the cash, thick stacks of bills, placing them on the counter. It felt unreal. This wasn't just money, it was freedom. It was agency. It was a tangible manifestation of taking back power. I gathered the money, put it back in my purse, the weight of it solid and reassuring. I signed the forms, thanked the man, and left the shop. Back on the street, I felt different, lighter, and yet stronger. The anxiety was still there, the need to get back to the facility on time, but it was overlaid with a sense of quiet triumph. I had done it. I had taken something that represented my betrayal and turned it into the means for my liberation. It wasn't revenge, not really. It was survival. It was reclaiming a piece of myself that had been taken. I walked back towards the dentist office, arriving just as the taxi pulled up. I got in, gave the driver the facility's address, and leaned back against the seat, the purse heavy in my lap. The ride back felt different too. The world outside the window seemed sharper, more vibrant. I wasn't just a passenger being transported from one place to another. I was a woman with resources, with options. I had been moved into a box, but I had found a way to build a door. As the taxi pulled up to the facility, I felt a sense of calm settle over me. I walked through the familiar entrance, nodded to the receptionist, and went straight to my room. No one seemed to notice anything different. I had successfully navigated the system, used its own structures to my advantage. Closing the door of my room behind me, I sat on the edge of the bed, the money spread out before me. It wasn't a king's ransom, but it was a significant amount. Enough for a deposit on a small apartment, enough to hire a lawyer, enough to live independently for a while, more than enough to start over. Looking at the bills, I didn't feel greedy or triumphant in a cruel way. I felt a deep, quiet satisfaction. This money wasn't stained by malice. It was purified by necessity and justified by betrayal. It was mine, earned not through work, but through resilience. The phone rang later that evening. It was Sophie. Her voice was tight, strained. "Mom, did you go to the dentist today?" "Yes, dear," I said, keeping my voice level. "I did. It was a good checkup." There was a pause, a hesitation I hadn't heard in her voice in a long time. "Okay, good." Another pause. "Mom, have you seen my jewelry box? The small wooden one?" My heart gave a small lurch, but my voice remained steady. "Your jewelry box?" "No, dear. Why would I have seen it? It's in your flat." The silence stretched heavy and thick. I could almost hear her mind racing. Had she checked? Was the ring missing? Was she trying to ascertain if I had been there? "Right," she said, finally, her voice a little breathless. "Right, of course. Silly me. Just misplaced it, I suppose." Misplaced an expensive engagement ring. The irony was sharp, almost cutting. "I hope you find it, Sophie," I said, my tone genuinely solicitous. Let her sweat. Let her search. Let her feel a fraction of the anxiety and helplessness I had felt. "Me too," she said, the cheerfulness gone, replaced by a strained edge. "Anyway, just checking in. I'll call you soon." She hung up. I sat there, the phone buzzing in my hand, a small smile playing on my lips. The power dynamic had shifted. The hunted had become the hunter, in her own small, quiet way. The days that followed were tense, though the tension was entirely on Sophie's end. She called more frequently, her questions circling, probing. Had I talked to anyone from the old neighborhood? Had I been out of the facility at all, other than the dentist? I answered truthfully, but minimally. I had been out to the dentist. I hadn't spoken to neighbors. Not yet. I let her dig her own hole of suspicion. I knew she wouldn't call the facility to check my movements. That would reveal her own anxiety, her own potential culpability in whatever she suspected. She was trapped by her own secrets. Meanwhile, I started making plans. Real plans, not just fantasies. I researched small apartments in safe, independent living communities. places I would choose, places that offered autonomy, not constraint. I looked up lawyers specializing in elder law and property disputes. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was acting. I was building. With the money from the ring, I had options. I had leverage. It was a bittersweet victory, though. The money represented the loss of my home, the fracture of my relationship with my daughter, but it also represented my refusal to be a victim. One afternoon, I walked out into the courtyard. The sun was shining. I sat on a bench watching the birds, a small, defiant act of simply existing, being present. A few other residents were there, some talking quietly, others lost in thought. I felt a connection to them, a shared understanding of navigating this stage of life, perhaps even a shared experience of loss or disconnection from family. But I also felt a difference. I had a secret, a source of quiet strength that set me apart. I wasn't waiting for permission or provision. I was making my own way. The ultimate confrontation with Sophie hasn't happened yet. I haven't told her I sold the ring. Part of me wants to see how long it takes her to admit it's missing, to confront me herself. And part of me is savoring this quiet inversion of power. She thinks she put me away, neatly packaged and forgotten. She thinks she got what she wanted, the house, the money, the freedom from responsibility. But I took something precious from her, something that represented her future, with Liam, a future built on deceit, and I used it to buy back my own future. The pain of her betrayal will never fully heal. The knowledge of what she did, how she saw me, is a scar I will carry. But it is no longer an open wound. It has hardened into a quiet resolve. I will use the money to find a new home, a real home, one I choose. I will surround myself with things that are mine, things that hold genuine memories. I will rebuild my life, not as the person Sophie discarded, but as the woman who survived, who fought back, who reclaimed her dignity. The ring is gone. My house is likely gone too, or soon will be. These are losses, but I gained something invaluable in return. My freedom, my agency, and the fierce quiet knowledge that I am stronger than I ever knew. The final act of this drama is yet to unfold, the conversation with Sophie that will lay bare the truth. But for now I sit in this courtyard, the sun on my face, the weight of the money a comforting presence in my mind, and I breathe. I am here. I am not broken, and I will not be forgotten. The bittersweet taste of freedom is complex, laced with sorrow for what was lost, but undeniably potent, and it is mine.